The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Cedar.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, June 22nd, 2020. My name is Sam Cedar. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps and steps and steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, New Yorker Magazine executive editor for news, two-time Pulitzer-winning journalist David Rohde will be joining us. Discuss his book, In Deep, the FBI, the CIA, and the truth about America's deep state. Meanwhile, Trump's Friday night massacre fails. Bill Barr moves to Plan B to end investigations into Donald Trump. And meanwhile, Trump's COVID party in Tulsa also falls flat. It probably barely infected hundreds of people. Mitch McConnell will be bringing a weak tea policing reform bill to the floor this week. And the CARES Act inadvertently shows the best way to fight poverty. Just give people money. Donald Trump admits to slowing testing, and Dems slam the Health and Human Services for $14 billion in unspent testing and tracing funds. House to vote on D.C. statehood this week. Important primaries in New York and Kentucky, as well as next week, more important primaries, and then also next week, a referendum to expand Medicaid in Oklahoma may have trouble because of COVID. And sadly, ladies and gentlemen, it appears that Donald Trump has soured on Juan Guaido. All this and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate your being here. I hope everyone had a nice weekend. Of course, it was a lot of time spent on watching Donald Trump's failure in Tulsa, I guess, on some level. Certainly the expectations game was poorly played by his campaign. 6,000 people in the middle of a pandemic. Not a bad number. Of course, his people are inclined to believe the pandemic is false. And they certainly thought they were going to have a lot more. Supposedly 1 million people had responded. They were going to sell out the 20,000 person BOK, B-O-K, I don't even know how they pronounce it, stadium in Tulsa. And they had set up an outdoor stage for nearly 40,000 people. They thought they were getting 60,000 people at a minimum. And it turns out that in part why they thought that was the case was because a lot of kids on TikTok and fans of Korean pop music, I don't even know what that means. I don't know how they organize. K-pop fans apparently registered for a bunch of those tickets. Like just about every other parent my age or younger, I would imagine, I asked my daughter if she knew about it. She was like, oh, yeah. But now the big thing is that we're going to try and save Barron. People feel bad for him. And I was like, all right, I don't need to hear more. So we will be talking about that. It remains to be seen what will happen in terms of the COVID numbers from that rally. Just prior to the rally's beginning, it was reported that 6 members of the Trump advance campaign team had it. Unclear how ill they became. But we will dig more into that. In fact, here is just to give you a taste of what kind of folks showed up for the rally. I mean, obviously there's 2 dynamics going on here. One is their complete overestimation of how many people were coming. I mean, it was massive. And, the value of that in a material way to those of us who want Donald Trump to lose the election is that it creates more dissent within the campaign. Donald Trump cannot be happy with Brad Parscale. I would be a little bit concerned if I got if anybody on our team, if Brendan came and told me, like, look, we've got 300,000 people listening to yesterday's show, and I'm anticipating 350 for tomorrow. And I started touting it. And then we show up on the next show, and it's like, well, we got 20,000 people. Brendan would have a talking to. He would have his commissary badge docked for probably close to a week.
Yeah. Ow.
Yeah. Ow. That's right. So there's going to be a lot of dissent, I would imagine, on that campaign for the next couple of days. Who knows? The other aspect of that was just simply that, never mind the expectations game, people were either, let's put it this way, people decided that it was not worth going to see Donald Trump and risking getting COVID. The people who came out believed that you can't catch COVID, that it's not real. Even though they had their the health department in Tulsa issuing warnings. They just believe he couldn't get it. And here is a Trump supporter at the rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma from Friday night. Guy named Jason. He's a supporter of Donald Trump's. This is CNN spoke to him. We need some volume there, Brendan. And I like the mask that I like the mask that the CNN reporter is wearing there. Pretty heavy duty stuff.
About the spread, I think in the general population, I'm seeing like a 0.4 or 0.2% mortality rate.
And even if you got it, you're not worried about it.
No, and even if I did get sick from it, I mean, there's so many positive studies with the hydrochloroquine and zinc combination.
The FDA got written. They said you can't prescribe it for that anymore.
No, the FDA saying that it is able to be prescribed. They only shut it down for a certain thing. And actually, in Trump's roundtable the other day, they explained it very well.
Wow. So first off, he starts off by saying, like, I'm only seeing a 0.2, 0.4% mortality rate. Just to do the math, I just did it quickly here. 0.2% mortality rate in a country of 300 million is 600,000 people. 0.4 obviously would be 1.2 million people. I guess that's you don't have to worry about that. That guy seems to be in very good health. And, of course, he's completely wrong about, I mean, I don't know if he's wrong about chloroxy. What is it again? I can't even remember now. Chloroquil. I don't know if he's wrong about it. I'm not a doctor, but he's wrong about what the FDA said. Now, maybe the FDA is wrong and he has done his own studies and he understands it. But the level of misinformation that these people have when they show up there, and you notice that the CNN reporter was wearing a double mask. He had an N95 underneath his like black face covering mask because I think he was like a little bit nervous. I don't blame him. I'd be a little concerned too going in there. All right. We will get to David Rohde in just a moment, but many of you probably have noticed that I did a little shaving at the, it's actually at the beginning of the weekend. This is a coincidence that we have a Harry's ad today. That was not planned on my part. But as you know, things are a little bit rough right now for everybody. Harry's is still there to help you look your best while saving you a little cash along the way. Harry has your grooming needs covered. Listeners can get a Harry's trial set delivered to their doorstep by going to harrys.com/majority report. I've talked about Harry's for years. You know what it is. It is a return to the essentials. Quality durable braids at a fair price. Blades cost as little as $2 each, delivered straight to your doorstep. They also have a 100% quality guarantee. If you don't love the product, you don't love your shave, they give you a full refund. And they set aside 1% of their proceeds for nonprofit healthcare-oriented organizations. Harry is donating $1 million worth of shaving supplies to hospitals across the U.S. as we speak. I gave up on the mustache and the beard and the mutton chops Friday evening. I like to shave at night. Just got to be too annoying. But now I'm looking, I see myself on this video and it looks boring now without the mustache. So I may go back to it. In the meantime, though, I trimmed it with some scissors and then I cleaned myself up with my Harry's razor. You can too, folks. Listeners of my show can redeem their Harry's trial set at harrys.com/majority report. You get a weighted ergonomic handle for a firm grip, a 5-blade razor with a lubricating strip, and that cedar-developed trimmer blade. They didn't develop it for me, but I like it. Rich lathering shave gel with aloe to keep your skin hydrated, and a travel blade cover to keep your razor dry and easy to grab on the go. Go to harrys.com/majority report. Start shaving better today. Also, I have a new favorite pair of pants. It's those Flag and Anthem. They're sort of like jean style pants. I don't know how to say it, but they're made out of a different fabric. I look, here's the bottom line. I don't know anything about clothes. I don't know what I like. Well, I know what I don't like. It's also very difficult, obviously, to go shopping now. Well, the thing I found about Stitch Fix, the measurements fit like they're supposed to. Stitch Fix is a personal styling company. It makes getting the clothes you love effortless. It's a completely different way to shop. It's all about you. What you do, you get started, go to stitchfix.com/majority. You set up your profile. They ask you questions about what brands you like, what kind of style of clothing you like, what colors, et cetera, et cetera. Then they deliver you great looks that are personalized just based upon your parameters, I guess, and the colors you like, and the styles you like, and your budget. You pay $20 for each styling fee, for each fix, as they call it, and that's credited towards anything you keep in the box of stuff they send you. You can schedule it at any time. There's no subscription required. Shipping, returns, exchanges, they're all free and easy. Stitch Fix does the hard work for you. It makes great style effortless for everybody, including men, women, and kids. Like I say, I have a new favorite pair of pants, and that's a big deal for me. Ever since I got out of my era of wearing Carhartts every single day, it's hard for me to find pants I like. These new Flag and Anthem pants I got, well, they're not that new, but I'm loving them. I break them out when I want to feel like, now I just walk around in my underwear because I never leave the house. But when I want to actually, I went to an outside barbecue, so wore those pants. But when I got my Stitch Fix, I got the pants, I got those chukas, which I'm mispronouncing. Right, Brendan? Or did I say it right this time?
I say chuckas, but
chuckas. Got a great pair of sort of desert booty shoes. But then I got a mock turtleneck. I sent it back. I didn't like it. It was easy. Now they know. Never give Sam a mock turtleneck. You can get started today at a stitchfix.com/majority. You get 25% off when you keep everything in your fix. That's stitchfix.com/majority for 25% off when you keep everything in your fix. Stitchfix.com/majority. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, New Yorker Magazine executive editor for news, David Rohde, on his book, In Deep, FBI, CIA, and the Truth About America's Deep State. We'll be right back after this. We are back. Sam Cedar on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome to the program two-time Pulitzer award-winning journalist, New Yorker Magazine executive editor for news, David Rohde, on his book, The FBI, In Deep, the FBI, the CIA, and the Truth About America's Deep State. David, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks so much for having me on.
Let's start with the origins, and then we'll move into the use of the term, I guess, deep state. Where do we first hear that term?
It was really not used in the U.S. for decades. It was something that sort of political scientists used to talk about Turkey and Turkey's military blocking democracy in that country. And it wasn't really used during the 2016 campaign either. But it was a Breitbart invoked it in a piece right after Trump won the election, and it basically declared, a great power struggle is underway between President-elect Trump and the deep state. And
when we're talking about it in the context of Turkey, we're talking about an entrenched military. When Breitbart talks about it, it sort of feels like it could be just about anybody.
Yeah, and to be fair, and I should say one of the reasons I wrote this was that there's real suspicion on the left and the right of the government. There's sort of different language that people use. So liberals, I'd say fear the military-industrial complex. That there's a group of generals and sort of big defense firms that endlessly lead the country into war. The term that's used more on the right is the administrative state, and that's a fear of an ever-growing federal government that's sort of relentlessly taking away our rights and invading our personal lives.
On the right, I mean, I don't want to too fine a point about this, but on the right, it feels like it is much more centrally controlled as opposed to the left's perspective on this. The military-industrial complex is, I mean, it's an Eisenhower term, right? I mean, and it's also, I mean, there's been, I think, fairly decent scholarship that in the at the very least, Kennedy got some severe pushback based upon his desire to sort of maybe push forward through the Cold War. But it feels like it's become a much more sort of like directed animal in the Breitbartian version.
Yeah, the piece I referenced was written by Virgil. I'm not sure who that is. It's a pen name. From there, some people, suspect it's Steve Bannon himself. But they talk about, anybody who works for the government. If you're a teacher or a police officer, you're part of the deep state. Any company that gets government contracts are sort of part of the deep state. And Trump, takes the term and sort of weaponizes it and says, there's this deep state that's trying to force me from office. And I try to be fair in the book. Like, it starts out talking about Cold War abuses, the thing you mentioned with Kennedy. There was terrible stuff that the FBI and the CIA were doing on their own. In the Cold War, there was a bunch of reforms in the 70s that the book covers we can talk about. There haven't been as many problems since the 70s of like the CIA and the FBI going rogue. It's been more, presidents using the agencies in questionable ways. But Trump is the first president to sort of state a coup, is being carried out against me by government officials. It's really unprecedented how he's used the term.
I was also really fascinated by the story of the guy that you spoke to who coined the term. I think you said back in 2007. He was invited on InfoWars. Tell that story, because to me that is fascinating, because I've spent a decent amount of time over the course of my radio career talking about Alex Jones and hypothesizing sort of like what his function is, and then in many respects, if he wasn't if he didn't exist, that the CIA would create him for this reason in many respects. So we just tell that story.
Sure. And then this is again this thing where there's again fear on the left and the right. So the first person that I could find who applied the term deep state to the U.S. was a University of California Berkeley professor. His name is Peter Dale Scott. I tracked him down and interviewed him, and he invoked the term in a book he wrote in 2007 called The Road to 9/11. Scott's view is sort of a version of the military-industrial complex. He's also afraid of Wall Street and sort of corporate America, and so that there's sort of a alliance there. But it's definitely from a leftist sort of perspective about basically arguing that after 9/11, the military-industrial complex pushed us into all these wars, and he felt they'd done the same thing during the Cold War. He does go on Jones's far right, radio program, and he finds an audience there. But he told me, Scott, that he's really disappointed with what's happened to the term in recent years. He told me they've vulgarized the term. They made it a less useful term. And that, again, he feels like it's being applied to sort of score political points and attached to virtually anyone who Trump feels is sort of threatening him or questioning him or disagreeing with his public statements.
I mean, give me a characterize, because that sort of, I guess, I mean, you've characterized it a little bit, but I'm curious as to a little bit more perspective on that original use of the term, because I think depending on how I think there is a series of aligned interests with a lot of those folks, right? Financiers and people who sell weapons and people who use weapons. There's a lot of aligned interests there, and there was certainly enough lined up to support an invasion and occupation of a country that ends up being our longest and arguably least successful, or maybe second least successful war. But it is that perspective is then sort of mystified via Alex Jones into this sort of more shadowy thing that is out there that is really impenetrable, right? Like one seems to be sort of like, from what we could say, like politics in the sense that you could deal with on a sort of a political level, and then Jones turns it into this thing like Trump does in a way that is, near QAnon or QAnon adjacent.
Yeah, it's much more of a conspiracy, that there's a secret plot by the FBI to, block Trump from winning the election and then discredit him, after he does. And look, every president's come to Washington and been, frustrated. Reagan came in and said he felt the State Department was blocking his desire to implement a policy that's tougher on communism. Barack Obama came in and felt that generals in the Pentagon were leaking possible troop numbers for Afghanistan, publicly, and that kind of boxed him in. But no one has said that there's a secret sort of cabal of FBI and CIA officials, secretly plotting against Trump. There were mistakes made, which we can talk about more, during the 2016 election by the FBI, but I did not find, a plot. The Trump campaign was, Trump Tower was not wiretapped as he claims. The Mueller investigation was not a secret conspiracy to destroy Trump's presidency. In fact, Mueller's finding about collusion helped Trump. So I don't like the term deep state. To me, it's sort of political rhetoric. If you like, government, if you lean left, you'll talk about, quote unquote, good government. If you want to discredit government as a conservative, you use terms like, deep state or the swamp to dismiss it and to discredit any member of the government that you feel, is undermining you or challenging you.
And you go through the church committee, which largely it seems came out of, came out of Watergate, in this sort of sense that, and things like COINTELPRO came up out of the abuses by the FBI and the CIA in the 60s. How much of that is, I guess, sort of like, how much of that stuff that's true? I mean, to the extent that we got the true story out of the church committee commission, how much of that is foundational to this, or is it really just Bannon's attempt to mystify the administrative state, which he said publicly their agenda was to go in. I think he said this at CPAC a couple of months after the election, that he wanted to go in and dismantle the administrative state. How much is based on it sort of a hard foundation, and how much of it is just sort of like the construct is used and then everything else is just sort of backfilled?
There were, terrible things the FBI and CIA did, I think, before these reforms were carried out in the 70s. And I think it's a case of legitimate public fears on the left and the right, being played on and exaggerated for political gain by, Breitbart and the president. And one of the themes, in the book, and I want to talk about, is sort of conspiracy theories and how I think they travel like faster and farther online now than they ever did in the past. And how dangerous they are. I think the pandemic and our kind of inability to agree on, how serious a threat coronavirus is, you had that Trump voter on earlier, shows how if we can't agree on basic facts, we're going to have a really hard time functioning as a democracy. But just a quick anecdote, it is true. The FBI, infiltrated and wiretapped the civil rights movement. They wiretapped Martin Luther King's, hotel room. J. Edgar Hoover, largely acting on his own, tried to discredit Martin Luther King. The FBI also, on the right, investigated the John Birch Society. The main investigator for this investigation, the Church Committee, was a lawyer. I'll just tell one anecdote about him, which plays into the conspiracy theory problem. His name was Fritz Schwartz. His middle initials were AO. So his name is actually F.A.O. Schwartz. He was the grandson of the wealthy New York resident who started the F.A.O. Schwartz toy store. And, Schwartz grew up in Manhattan, went to Harvard, was sort of this member of the Ivy League elite. And he interviewed dozens of CIA officers in 1976 and 1977 about all the crazy things they had done during the Cold War and, plots against foreign leaders. And he found it chilling how effective these CIA officials were at lying. And he also interviewed FBI agents. They tended to be they went to public universities and were more, less elitist. And he was more worried about what the FBI had done because it undermined the functioning of American democracy in and of itself. And it worried him too when he talked to the FBI agents. They rationalized. They said they had to do this. That there were fears that Dr. King was a communist, and they had to go beyond existing laws to protect the country and its culture and its freedom from foreign infiltration or communist infiltration. And again, it's conspiracy theories and fear leading to abuses and violence. And I worry about this dynamic today where people just leap at these conspiracy theories.
Do you think I want to get to the conspiracy theory part of it, but do you think that the FBI and the CIA, those dynamics, that the CIA were really good at lying and the FBI were sort of really good at at buying into a narrative that they're being told about what represents a danger and doesn't? Do you think that's changed dramatically?
I think it's improved, and I think particularly in the digital age, when these agencies, and particularly the National Security Agency, can collect staggering amounts of personal information from all of us as we live our lives increasingly online, we need to guard them really closely. And here's a little boring history about a little spinach for listeners, but after the Church Committee comes out, there's just a raft of reforms that are created. There's a fear of a 40-year reign like J. Edgar Hoover's in the FBI. So under Presidents Ford and Carter, there's a 10-year term limit on how long an FBI director can serve. There's a new court created, the FISA court, which we can talk about more, which gets a judge has to approve wiretapping of any Americans by the FBI. The CIA used to carry out covert actions after just conversations with presidents. There's a new law that says they have to write out covert action findings, which describe in writing what the CIA is going to be doing in a covert action. The president has to sign it. The finding goes to the leaders of both parties in Congress. There's new intelligence committees created in the House and the Senate in the 70s in both houses of Congress to oversee what's going on. There are inspectors general that Carter creates. Trump has been firing them recently, but to look out for abuses and waste. And independent counsels, they change over the years, are also created in the late 70s, Robert Mueller-like investigations. And all of these things are checks on the FBI and the CIA, abusing American civil rights again, and also checks on president. You mentioned Nixon and Watergate, the president using these powers to sort of attack his political opponents. So it's gotten better. There was Iran-Contra, there's other things we can talk about, but if you look at 9/11, that is George W. Bush, carrying out warrantless mass surveillance. He does not tell these FISA court judges, but that's a president doing it. It's George W. Bush having the CIA carrying out rendition and torture. Again, that's a president taking these actions. It's not the CIA or the NSA doing those things without the president knowing.
So you're not, okay, just to be clear for folks, you're not saying that that makes it necessarily any more justifiable. It just means that these are agencies that are at the very least, there's some measure of accountability that they're subject to, at least within the context of the political leadership of the government, as opposed to what we saw prior to the Church Committee was these agencies sort of operating rogue and without any type of political accountability.
Yeah, and I'm a biased journalist. Like, you've got a competition, you've got multiple ways that these agencies are being overseen. So you've got judges who can, declare some kind of surveillance improper. You've got congressional committees where you hope an ambitious young member of the House is going to, attack, FBI or CIA officials if they can, and make a name for themselves if they can find wrongdoing. You've got the press all over this. I don't think there's enough transparency, but the idea is you just don't want the president overseeing these spy agencies. You want all three branches of government and the press and the courts involved to really stay on top of them.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about on the other side with the conspiracy theories. Like it is, and you mentioned that, that we see the implications of this, I think really vividly in the context of a pandemic, right? I mean, this is an event that's sort of built to show, to illustrate like the danger of having societies that are so fractured that there's a significant portion of a society that is so willing to believe in such fantastical things that it makes agreeing on the basic fact of a pandemic difficult. And I think you said pandemic. I think probably what you meant was plandemic. But I mean, this is, this seems to have been, I mean, is this a strategy from your perspective that the Trump administration deploys? Is this a Bannon strategy, or is it real, or does it, or is Trump, I mean, it's largely irrelevant, I think, at least in terms of for the moment and how people react to these things. But I think there is this question of how crazy is Donald Trump as defined by believing stuff that's just simply fantastical. And other people around him are exploiting that for their specific agendas. Or how much is he exploiting that for, how much awareness is there on his part? I mean, I don't know, at the end of the day, it makes a difference if they're not, spending money on contact tracing and testing, but it is an interesting dynamic. What's your sense of that? And I know you've done, substantial reporting on this.
So, current and former White House officials say that, President Trump, he's a product of the New York real estate world where everybody is kind of, exaggerating a little bit what's going on when they're doing a deal. Everybody's got an angle. And so the president just sort of doesn't buy that the reporters sitting in front of him in the Rose Garden or in the White House briefing room are trying to ask unbiased questions or even present relatively unbiased stories. And I'm not saying any journalist is perfect, but he is inclined to kind of believe these conspiracy theories. He's deeply distrustful of experts. He always was from his days as a developer in New York. And so that leads him to, to discount, the danger of coronavirus, the early warnings he received. There's also a touch of kind of conservative belief that we shouldn't use too much federal government power. An official who recently left the NSC told me that, Trump, just this idea of using federal government power to get masks and ventilators. There was a real belief in the White House that you were much better off using the private sector, and that led to a lot of these chaotic task force and these kind of things. But it's scary in that you have, Tony Fauci, the country's leading infectious disease expert, attacked by Trump supporters as fraudgy, and they talk about a corona coup. And we didn't handle the pandemic well. I mean, our the death rate in Hong Kong and in some other parts of the world, in Israel, was far lower than the United States. We see this uptick again now. So there's
Right. We're still
real
not
consequences
handling
to
the
this.
pandemic well in many respects.
Yeah, and then I'll try to get in my thing about. I think there was an Axios poll that said, and there's bias on the liberal side too. So they asked about what did people think of the death numbers for coronavirus in the U.S. And conservatives, overwhelmingly said they felt that the number was being exaggerated, and then liberals believe that the government numbers were less than they actually were. So you do have some of this conspiracy stuff going on on the left. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, I'm a little biased, but isn't the reason why those, I don't know if they're necessarily on the left, but if they identify on the left, think that the government numbers are undercounted is simply because we had reports from news organizations and scientists who said these are probably undercounted, because if you go year over year, March 2020 versus, April 2020 versus April 29. I mean, that's not a conspiracy theory. That's just thinking that the number of deaths with coronavirus have not been counted fully because there wasn't a mechanism in which to do so. And there's all these extraneous extra deaths. I guess I'm taking issue with the equivalency of they're both being conspiracy theories. I don't think that the response that we undercounted the COVID deaths is a conspiracy theory as much as it is. There's a lot of reporting and science that suggests that we probably have not counted as many people who died.
I think that's fair, and I would agree that there isn't an equivalence. And part of the book is to kind of say, and Fauci's an easy example, but we need to have kind of career government officials in positions that are apolitical, civil servants who serve, even when, throughout their careers in the federal government, like Fauci, whether the president's Republican or Democrat. And I would just urge people to try to, you can be skeptical of the government, but don't be cynical. But there is no one that comes close to Donald Trump. And whether he believes these conspiracy theories or not, there is a clear political strategy to use conspiracy theories for political gain. He made his name by, spreading the conspiracy theory about Barack Obama not being born in the United States. He has used it effectively he's very effective, and there's a strategy to it to discredit power sources and information sources that challenge him. He did that, with Mueller, saying the investigation was a witch hunt. He's done it very effectively with the news media, declaring it fake news. And now it's, he uses it against any government expert that challenges him. And it works. It's spreading. It's changing our politics, and it's really dangerous and destructive.
Let's talk about, and like I say, and like you said, it's hard to know exactly how much of this is Donald Trump genuinely believing this. It recalls to mind the story of Sam Israel, who was who you may recall was had basically created this very fraudulent hedge fund back maybe in the wake of Madoff. I'm not sure exactly if I can place it, but he ended up he had created this, stolen hundreds of millions of dollars essentially, but ended up getting ensnared in a con himself about believing that there was a secret Fed that only rich people had access to, and he ended up getting swindled with money that he had swindled. But it was largely because he had grown up in an environment on Wall Street where he just assumed that everybody was as fraudulent as he had seen. And so he just, and there is a quality of like Donald Trump where I think you're alluding to that maybe even go beyond just being raised in real estate. Just when you're crooked, there's a reason to believe that everything is crooked on some level. And that's also, I think, part of the way that you justify operating in that way is just like doing what everybody else is doing. Give me a sense of those, though, that are enabling him. I know you've written quite extensively on Bill Barr. because in many respects, he seems to me to be the most dangerous person in the administration, because he seems to be fairly competent at what his project is, maybe more so than others. Tell us a little bit about Bill Barr and how he ended up, his history in this regard.
So he is, I call him the most sort of feared and effective member of the cabinet. And again, I'll talk about rationalizations and conspiracy theories and stuff like that. So he's, in Barr's defense, for decades, he has believed that the presidency is the most important branch of the U.S. government. And he has believed that after Watergate, some of the reforms I mentioned, where you have inspectors general and independent counsels like Robert Mueller, and you have even these oversight committees, the intelligence committees, watching what the president is doing, watching what executive branch agencies are doing, is weakening the presidency in a way that endangers the country. Barr gave a speech last fall to the Federalist Society, and he argued that throughout American history, when the country's faced war or economic calamity, and now you could say pandemic, it's the presidency that saved the country. That Congress is too divided to act. The judiciary obviously doesn't have the means or the mechanisms to do it. And so, friends of his told me that Barr is, joined the Trump administration to protect the presidency. He felt it had been weakened too much after Watergate. It was being weakened too much by all these attacks on Trump. And that's his rationale for what he's done. I think he's gone too far, but that's his rationale, at least.
I mean, I know this is a little bit outside your portfolio as a reporter, but I mean, give me your assessment of how rational that take is. I mean, because by all accounts, it appears that the presidency is as powerful as it's ever been. I mean, if it's the case that that the FBI and the CIA was rogue in the, and that, prior to the church committee, I mean, you haven't had Congress question the presidents whatsoever on waging war, which I would imagine is like the biggest power that you have as the president. The idea that the presidency needs to be strong to deal with a pandemic does not look like, that theory is just not bearing out. It appears like, frankly, right now. I mean, how rational do you think Barr's assessment is? I mean, you can't get into his head to know if it's sincere, but something's driving him. That seems to be, who knows what, but as a political project, that seems to be just sort of like, really? You think that after the Bush administration, after even Barack Obama creating a legal framework to assassinate American citizens, that just seems, I don't know, a hard proposition to accept.
You're right. And I mean, there are major changes in the 70s. One of the things is what you just mentioned, the War Powers Act. So I do think the presidency was weakened, some would say appropriately, in the 70s. And then you're right, post 9/11, presidency comes roaring back. George W. Bush carries out, unprecedented, renditions around the world. There's a bunch of things we can talk about. And Barack Obama comes up with a legal framework to assassinate Americans in drone strikes without any public court proceeding. Anwar al-Awlaki, Yemeni American, a U.S. citizen, killed by the U.S. government. And I think that's an excess that happened sort of post 9/11. So I disagree with Barr. The current example was, Barr said, it was outrageous that when Trump, announced his travel ban right after he became president, that there was some, federal judge on the West Coast that could issue an injunction that could prevent the travel ban from being carried out nationwide. And where Barr goes way too far is, essentially he supported Trump's stonewalling of the impeachment proceedings against him regarding Ukraine. Barr cooperated less with the impeachment investigation. Barr and Trump cooperated less with the impeachment investigation. They blocked all access to witnesses, i.e. John Bolton, who we can talk about as well. They refused to hand over any documents regarding Ukraine to Congress. Nixon handed things over, and famously, when it went to the Supreme Court, there was a unanimous vote that the Nixon Oval Office tapes had to go be turned over to investigators. So I think he's gone too far. It's scary. It's a rebalancing of power that Barr supports, that where you're just rejecting a clear constitutional power of Congress to investigate and impeach a president.
But is he creating any structural change? I mean, he's running around to Italy. He's running around to various countries around the globe trying to put together this narrative of a rogue FBI that was inappropriately investigating him, that presumably was, part of a broader Biden-Clinton, complex that was doing this. Where is, if his concern is the integrity and the strength of the presidency, as opposed to Donald Trump's personal fortunes, where is the structural changes that he's making or that he's able to make from that position? It just seems like he's just functioning as Donald Trump's personal lawyer, and there's nothing that is precedential about what he's doing.
Well, I think there's, the ruling last week on DACA shows that he it all depends on, how the court rules on these various things, where there's pending cases on, can Congress force Don McGahn to testify as part of an impeachment inquiry? That ruling hasn't come about yet. But the DACA ruling last week was an example of John Roberts joining the 4 liberals on the court to say that the Trump administration's cancellation of DACA was capricious. Like, it was so random that it was therefore illegal. So I was much more worried that all of this executive privilege, all this blocking of access to White House records that Barr supported, the president's tax returns, that's going to the Supreme Court also, that Barr would succeed if the Supreme Court, decided these cases in Trump's favor. There's a lot more cases to be decided, but the judicial branch, and you're going to hear me over and over, I want a divided government. I want 3 co-equal branches holding each other in check. So in recent weeks, you see the judicial branch pushing back, the judge pushing back on the Michael Flynn case, where Barr, drops the charges against Flynn. So it's actually the judicial branch that's pushing back hardest at Trump. Congress has largely failed.
I guess the former, the president's ability just by executive order to reverse things based on a whim. But it sort of feels like, the answer that we got from the Supreme Court was like, he can do it. He's just got to be less incompetent in the context, even in the census question, right? Like the census question essentially was a rebuke to Bill Barr, but it wasn't a rebuke to the theory that Barr was operating under. It was just a rebuke to, like, hey, we literally have someone who's provided evidence that you're lying to us because, he died. Like, we literally, we can't make this decision. Even if we desperately wanted to, we couldn't, because it's so obvious you're lying to us. Like, just go back and, if you had just come to us with, even a slightly plausible, the dog ate our homework excuse, you would have won here. Like, how is Bill Barr so dedicated to these sort of structural changes, but is so inept at them? Yet here he is with, Flynn, or doing this stuff with Berman. And I want to talk about that as well. Yeah. And none of that is, getting rid of Berman, it seems to me, or reducing Flynn's sentence. That does not seem to be structurally enhancing the power of the president. That seems to be working as Donald Trump's personal lawyer?
Yes, but I think the rationale for Barr is that, there never should have been a investigation of, the Trump campaign and its contacts with Russia, that the special prosecutor sort of pressured Flynn into making this guilty plea. I agree with you. I mean, if you look at the pattern and just even this week, so with Berman, it's astonishing. Like the Bolton book comes out, Bolton says that he, warned Barr that the president is, offering, Erdogan, the Turkish leader, to get rid of a case brought by federal prosecutors of a, Turkish company that could embarrass Erdogan. But so there's this, anyway, it's a narrative that Trump is intervening in all these cases. And then what is, Barr denies that publicly. And then on Friday night, he fires the very federal prosecutor at the center of all this in New York. It's the same incompetence that you've talked about. But I think one of the lessons of this whole era is how, fragile our system is. And you can just defy norms, whether you've got some constitutional rationale or you just want to serve the president that you love. Reports can be suppressed. Inspectors general can be fired who were supposed to look at billions of dollars in coronavirus funding. Again, Congress over and over is just kind of rolling over when it's their president in the White House. So there's just all kinds of warning signs about the challenges we face that I think go beyond the Trump era.
What do you think is behind the Berman firing? I mean, and just to be clear for people, Barr claimed that Berman resigned. By resigning because of and correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
There's a civil service statute essentially that says if he resigns, there is more latitude for the administration to appoint someone who does not come from the agency. However, if he's removed, it's necessarily his assistant. There's a specific succession that is mandated. Now, they wanted to put in the head of the SEC, who coincidentally represented Deutsche Bank, which supposedly coincidentally is one of the investigations that Berman is up to in terms of their relationship with Donald Trump. Berman ultimately decides that he will leave because he claimed that when Barr was forcing him that he could only be fired essentially by the judge that appointed him, he was willing to leave once he had secured a commitment that his assistant, Amy Strauss, I think it is, would be appointed the acting director until the Senate approved somebody. Lindsey Graham had come out that day and said, we won't approve the guy from the SEC. What do you think is behind this? I mean, you're 5 months out from an election. What do you think is behind them wanting to get rid of Berman?
It could be Berman is reported to be investigating Giuliani and his dealings in Ukraine. And this is the kind of I've just written a piece on this. It's being edited by a colleague of mine at the New Yorker, but it's this Berman firing combines the kind of sort of rank corruption, i.e. we're going to protect Rudy Giuliani and anybody else in Trump's circle in New York from investigation, with sort of sheer incompetence. Like how you can try to do this in a press release at 9:15 p.m. on a Friday night. Barr falsely stated, as you said, that Berman had agreed to resign when he hadn't. And how you think you're going to kind of pull this off, is kind of astonishing. So it's such a strange time, but it is really dangerous. And I think the only reason this sort of failed was, you mentioned Lindsey Graham. I mean, the president's poll numbers are down. Graham is facing a strong Democratic challenger, for his seat in South Carolina in November. And so Graham blocks it. He says, no, I'm not going to let the head of the SEC, who's also a golf buddy of the president, basically take over and squelch all these investigations in New York. So I just feel everything's very tenuous these days, that the system isn't working it's not as strong as we think. And we need to all engage more. in our democracy.
What's your sense as to, I mean, do you have a theory as to, I mean, they clearly were incompetent in the way that they executed this. Do you have a theory as to why they were attempting to do this? I mean, presumably, right? Like, Barr, let's put it this way. There's no way that Berman, 5 months out from the election or 4 months out from the election, is going to indict the sitting president's personal attorney, right? I mean, that's not happening. And all of these, and there's no way that he's going to move on Deutsche Bank in relationship to the president 4 or 5 months out from election, right? I mean, like that was rule number one of the Department of Justice in relationship to elections, prior to Comey announcing this. Seems to me what Donald Trump is signaling here is he's afraid he's going to lose the election, and then the investigation is going to move forward after he's out of office, and he's going to lose all his leverage to shut it down, and that they needed to essentially derail or taint or resolve all of these investigations prior to the election.
That could be it. Bolton specifically mentioned Berman and that Trump offered to, he said he could have Berman squelch this investigation into this Turkish company that would have embarrassed Erdogan. I mean, so there's a small chance that an enraged Trump, demands that this be done. But I think he has very effectively marginalized the press. He has, constantly attacked judges who rule against him. He's mocked Congress and just defied it, just defied congressional subpoenas. And he is, for a large part of the American public, he's discredited these other power centers. So, you could be right. And what leads Barr to, I think Barr was pressured to do it. I just can't imagine Barr would do it in this way at this time. But again, I just, so it's been if you're worried about the fate of American democracy, the failure of this effort, over the weekend, should make you feel good that there's enough political pressure on Lindsey Graham to not be part of this. But it's just a mind-boggling kind of what is happening week after week, and it's going to intensify between now and November.
Oh, yes. All right. Well, so lastly, let me just ask you about Bill Barr, because I find him to be the most fascinating character in this administration. What is your sense about what happened at Lafayette Square? I mean, Bill Barr assembles, right? Like, he claims that it was that the Lafayette Square protest, he walked out right before the president was to walk to this church and noticed, hey, wait a second, there's all these protesters here. And I think he's quoted as saying, I didn't tell them to get it done. I just was like, I didn't say go do it. I just wondered, why it wasn't getting done or something. There was some a thing that he said there that I don't know how he, at one point he gets a little legalistic for his own good. But what is your sense of that? I mean, somebody brought up all of these federal prison, guards or CPB specialty forces, or, somehow knowing that they'd be used for something. What do you make of all that?
I think that I'll go back to my, the danger of people rationalizing things. I want to give Bill Barr the benefit of the doubt. I think he knows what he's doing, but he spread all these Antifa conspiracy theories. And there's been great reporting about how in all the federal arrests, they haven't found Antifa, doing anything. And again, for decades, Barr was like a law and order guy. He during the Rodney King riots, when he was Attorney General under George H.W. Bush, he sent federal officers out there. So he believes that you kind of dominate, the street. But he's just gone too far, and I'll just end on this weekend. He gave a Fox interview this weekend. All this stuff has happened with Berman, and part of the interview is he says that mail-in voting, is going to open the floodgates for fraud in November. That's on Sunday. This morning, President Trump takes that statement by Barr, tweets it out, and then Trump sends out a second tweet, vastly exaggerating, what Barr has said, but this is how Barr enables Trump. And Trump says foreign governments have printed millions of fake mail-in ballots. The 2020 vote is fixed. And this is just terrifying and horrible for the country. I mean, if we have a contested election in November and you have Bill Barr kind of enabling, these crazy claims by Trump, I fear violence in this country between political factions, and that would be tragic. It's a very dangerous dynamic. Maybe Bill Barr is rationalizing that he's got to clear Lafayette Park because they're all anarchists and Antifa members. That kind of rationale, that use of excessive force is what's led to violations over and over in American history and dangerous discord. So I'm worried about all the conspiracy theories.
Indeed. David Rohde, the book is In Deep, FBI, CIA, and the Truth About America's Deep State. Thanks so much for your time today. We'll put a link to that book at majority.fm. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, Sam.
Bye-bye. All right, folks. There you have it.
This is so deep. It's a deep state.
So deep. So deep.
I wish I had my Hannity drop, but
Yeah, I understand. I gotta, it's only been like months now. We're here. I know, it sort of feels like we're at 3.5 months in this mode, aren't we?
A quarter.
Yeah, crazy. Folks, just a reminder, this program relies on your support. You can become a member of the Majority Report by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. I keep meaning to wear my merch stuff. People are like, you got to push the merch more. People love it. But you can go pick up our merch at shop.majorityreportradio.com. Check it out. Also, again, it's your membership that really keeps this program afloat. Merch is really there more to just like spread the word about the program as it is, as opposed to like the huge dollars that we're making off it. But I don't know, maybe if we unleash the pause it line, I think we will start to see the big bucks. But you can become a member of this program by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only get the free show, free of commercials, you also get extra material every day, extra content. Also, don't forget the AM Quickie, amquickie.com. You can sign up for the AM Quickie, get 6-7 minutes of headlines every morning via podcast, completely free. What else we got? JustCoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off of that. What's happening this week on the Michael Brooks show, Matt? How do you top Noam Chomsky?
I don't know that I know exactly how we're going to top him this week. I do not have the. I'm not sure yet, but it'll be a good one. I'm sure.
It'll definitely be
building
a good one.
Suspense.
For
the show. He doesn't let anyone know until.
That's right.
It's like a sneaker release or something.
Well, we got all these high-powered guests.
Like
schedules.
Shop. It's like one of those pop-up shops.
Exactly. Pop-up
schedules jump around sometimes. Well, Chomsky might drop in. Who knows?
Exactly.
Something he forgot to say on the first one. He's like, "Oh, by the way,
Sorry to interrupt." Just pops on the Zoom. I had the link. You can check that out at patreon.com/TMBS or youtube.com, The Michael Brooks Show. Also, joining us tomorrow, Noam McKee Const will be here. And you can always, as always, check out her show. I'm not sure what she's doing this week, but check it out at patreon.com/The Noam McKee Show or youtube.com, The Noam McKee Show. Check that out. And here's Jamie to tell us what's happening on the Antifada.
Hello.
Oh.
What?
I don't have mine anymore.
Oh, this? Well, you know what, Sam? Someone's got to hold it down for all of us.
Go.
And, don't feel bad. Not everyone can pull off this look.
I've been looking forward to the Serge Tankian episode of the Antifada.
Now that would be pretty cool, I gotta say. Sean and I kind of tricked ourselves into liking System of a Down sincerely by listening to them ironically so much, and now I just like them. And I hear the guy's got pretty good politics, so yeah.
Good solo stuff.
Have not heard his solo stuff. Anyway, speaking of the Antifada, I'm gonna plug a few things because this is the only day I'm gonna be on mic this week. So this week,
that's right.
Yeah,
I forgot.
Yeah, I got to go camping with my friend for her 40th birthday. So this week on the Antifada, we have an episode we released last Wednesday on the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone and mutual aid in Minneapolis. That is still available. Next week, this week. What week is it? I'm so confused. Wednesday, we have an interview with Scott Frazier from the very good LA podcast about the uprisings in Los Angeles, the unreformably corrupt and murderous LA Sheriff's Department, and how their terrible mayor, Mayor Carcetti, is dealing with the homeless problem by putting homeless people in concentration camps. Also, on Friday, for our patrons, I have a new Vampire Castle with Leslie Lee III from Struggle Session, where we talk about 2 vampire movies whose name escapes me right now. But it's good. Trust me, it's going to be good. Oh, yeah. We talk about Byzantium. Very good vampire movie. And we talk about another one. My brain is blank today. Sorry. Oh, and also, important announcement. Dun, dun, dun. I will be appearing on a panel at the Virtual Socialism Conference July 4th to talk about socialist organizing and the capitalist state.
There you go. Matt, what's happening on the Literary Hangover Twitch stream?
Tonight, I'll be hitting the high seas in Assassin's Creed Rogue, and we'll learn about John Paul Jones, the privateer who disrupted the Brits' sense of security during the American Revolution by raiding a few British coastal towns. And there will be a new episode of Literary Hangover in about a week or so, featuring a new guest. We'll be doing Toni Morrison's A Mercy, which takes place right after Bacon's Rebellion, and talks about how race and gender became legally formalized, but in a really great novel. So look forward to that.
And also just as a teaser for tomorrow, I mean, we're going to talk about it today, the office pool that we had as to the percentage of masks that we would see at the Tulsa rally. But the winner, I'm guessing, I mean, we haven't done a scientific study of this yet, but I mean, just by eyeballing this thing, was Nomi won. And I mean, I'm contesting it a little bit because she sort of parachuted in and got on the outside of me or the inside of me on the whole Price is Right system that we were using. Had I known she'd been there, she said 5%, I would have said 4%. But I had thought I had locked it up by going 10%, but whatever. I'm not going to.
We were also all betting under the guise that it would be a sellout crowd, and it was barely a third full. So I have some.
That's true too, well, I guess. But that we
the squishes that stayed home probably would have been the ones that wore the masks.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah. All right. Well, we will debate this and more in the fun half in just a moment when we take your call, 646-257-3920. Also, if you have the Majority app, you can get it at majorityapp.com for iOS or Android. You will be able to IM us during the program, and I've just turned it on. So see you there. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. Are you nervous? You're a little bit upset. You're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457-238-56-27. 1 half. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way. Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey! Shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
we are back. Sam Cedar on the Majority Report. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 570 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, is this Sam?
Yes.
Hey, this is Julian from Scranton, PA. How you doing?
I'm doing well. What's on your mind, Julian?
I was thinking about the Kentucky race for the Senate with Charles Booker.
Yep.
Scheduled for tomorrow.
Yep.
So as we know, this is sort of like a two-parter, but Jesus Christ. At some point last week, they closed a couple thousand polling locations.
Yep.
Leading to only 200, and there's only one in Louisville, and that's a city with around 700, 600,000 people.
Yep.
My question is, how, logistically do they do that? Like, who's the person who snaps their fingers and does that? And, what's the legal justification? What is that? How does that just happen?
I'll tell you. Okay, go ahead.
And also, secondly, how do you think the public is, interpreting this? Because to me, it's pretty obvious that this is, a sort of racist voter disenfranchisement to throw this primary towards Amy McGrath. But from what I've seen from, little corners of the internet, I feel like most people are just interpreting this as helping out Mitch McConnell, which I'm sure in the long run it will, but I just don't think it's a coincidence that this is happening before the primary rather than the general. But how do you think most people sort of view this?
Well, they're setting a precedent. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I don't think that there is, strong forces in Kentucky that control what's going on there that are, looking to help Amy McGrath as much as they are as basically trying to disenfranchise voters. Because I think, look, any confusion that takes place and any difficulty in voting that takes place during the primary is going to, at least they hope, depress turnout in the fall. I'm going to let you go and I'll answer your question. But here is what's happening in Kentucky. And the polling does show that Booker probably would do better than McGrath. I think it's still a long shot, but what they want to do is depress votes. And the best way to depress votes and suppress votes is to suppress votes. And it's not like there is a mechanism to unravel this. It is a long process, but you start with a conservative-controlled Supreme Court that guts the Voting Rights Act. In 2013, I think it is, they destroy Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. So states like Kentucky, and I believe they were one of the pre-clearance states, if they want to change their voting situation from a material perspective, like shutting down in Louisville, here's the figures. Jefferson County, the state's largest county, home to 767,000 voters or residents, and the city of Louisville, like our caller said, will have as its sole polling location a convention and expo center where voting booths have been set up 8 feet apart. 1 in 5 residents in that county is African American. It's the largest black population in the state. Now, I mean, if you think this is a coincidence, I've got a bridge to sell you. And so we have no pre-clearance from under Section 5. I don't know if Kentucky was one of those states. I don't know that it was, actually. But nevertheless, we have a Department of Justice not aggressive in these regards. On Thursday evening, a federal judge rejected an effort to add polling places to the state's largest counties. I don't know for sure who appointed that federal judge, but if I had to guess, I would tell you that it's not Barack Obama or Bill Clinton. They want to suppress votes because when you suppress votes in the primary, you will suppress votes presumably in the general election. Now, it doesn't always work that way. Wisconsin Republicans tried to do this and it got people pissed off. But the fact of the matter is like, if you show up to vote and there's 670,000 people who presumably, have one polling place, you're not going to go back in the fall because you're going to say, like, I'm not going to be able to vote. That's the way it works. That's what their hope is. But if you are in Kentucky and you do have the ability to vote for Booker, go vote for Booker. I would say also remind you, New York also votes tomorrow. And very important elections. We got a lot in New York City. You heard AOC on Friday talk about the importance of blue state Democrats actually being progressive, presumably representing some of the most progressive places in the country. They need to get into office and vote that way, as opposed to providing cover for the more conservative members of the caucus. So get out and vote tomorrow, folks. Very important. Same also with a week from tomorrow. If you're in Colorado, go vote for Romanoff. If you're in Oklahoma a week from tomorrow, vote for expanded Medicaid. That is also another place that's going to get hit hard by coronavirus in terms of voting opportunities. So makes a difference.
We got some great DSA endorsed candidates that you all can vote for. Josh did a plug for them last Friday, I believe. And you can look it up if you're in New York, socialists.nyc. Or if you are not in New York, it is DSAUSA.org. livestream.org. And as I always tell all of the ultra leftists who listen to my show, voting, it's a good idea. It can't hurt and it might even help. So there you go.
Exactly. Exact same amount of effort that it would take, regardless of how enthusiastic you are to vote. It's not that much effort. And it could very well make a difference. Also, I think the DSA, is a subset. There's probably a decent amount of crossover. I would imagine a significant amount of crossover. But if you're not sure, Justice Democrats, I would check their site as well. If you don't see anybody from a DSA perspective that they're supporting, check out Justice Democrats. I would imagine they have a wider slate, but certainly in New York, there's some very good opportunities for progressive pickups. And we'll see. AOC, I noticed, ran a negative ad against and it wasn't really, it's pretty easy. It's pretty low hanging fruit. But some people speculated that maybe this means that her internal polling is showing that she doesn't have that much of a lead. My guess is, and you got to go out and vote for her, because it would be a disaster for, both symbolically and materially, a disaster if she does not win.
Yeah.
Do not hesitate to go out and vote. And here's the thing. When I see that negative ad, I find it hard to believe that her internal polling is showing that she's in jeopardy. My guess is they want to win big, because that is also, from a symbolic standpoint, it's going to make a big difference. It sends a message to the national caucus. It sends a message to progressive challengers across the country. Look at how this is built. Bernie Sanders goes out. He loses in the 2016 election, but he does far better than anybody ever anticipated he would. I think including him from the beginning of it, and inspires people like AOC, people like Jamal Bowman, people like Simolis Lopez, other people. And he inspires AOC. She inspires these people. This is how it happens. And then at one point, you pick up 5, 10, 15, 20 genuine progressives, genuine leftists in the House. These numbers at one point, I don't know where it will be, you will hit a critical mass, and they will start operating as a block, and it has the potential to help. Everything that we're doing now, it seems to me, and I'm, we're trying to program a little bit in this way too. We have, during our vacation week, which is going to happen in a couple of weeks, we'll have Stephanie Kelton on. Is it Tom Tillis? Not Tom Tillis. Michael Pettis. Thank you. Tom Tillis. We're not going to have the senator from North Carolina on. What we're doing is we're laying the groundwork and getting ideas out there. A buddy of mine sends me a text the other night. He goes, I'm reading Stephanie Kelton's book and it's blowing my mind. And I'm like, why? And he goes, and then he starts explaining MMT to me. And I'm like, dude, she's been on multiple times on this program over the years. And you need to pay more attention to the show. But what's happening is that her ideas have hit a critical mass where they're being adopted by people who don't listen to political podcasts on a regular basis, even if, Charlie, they're hosted by one of your best friends in your entire life. And that's a good sign, because in the event that Joe Biden is the president or makes it across the finish line and serves for however long he can serve, whatever, there are going to be opportunities for these ideas to percolate through the system. And, just the idea that my friend, who apparently does not listen to the show as much as one would think he would, is writing me like, these are just societal decisions. that we're making. These are just political choices. To have just a bigger segment of the population realize that Cobra is just a supporting, subsidizing Cobra during this era is just a political decision, or ending the $600 extra a week for unemployment. That's just a political decision. There's no financial physics that say, economic physics that say you can't do that. There's no physics that says that you can't provide people housing. There's no economic physics to this. These are all political decisions that we as a society are choosing to make. Having that awareness will pay dividends in the event that there is a political apparatus that we have a little bit more access to than, let's say, the Trump administration.
Yeah, don't be sad that your friend doesn't listen to the show. Pretty much none of my friends listen to my show, and I've made my peace with it. It's fine.
No, I mean, yeah, it's just, what are you picking up a Stephanie Kelton book for without even like Googling and see if I've interviewed her 4 times?
A bit rude.
It's rude. It's not like he's busy. He sits around a lot. It's unbelievable. Just in case you were wondering why there's $14 billion still sitting in the Health and Human Services line item budget that is earmarked for testing and contact tracing, and just in case you were wondering why it is that the United States, that is presumably, number one. Haven't you ever heard that? We're number one. Yet, why is it that almost every single other country in the world has managed to create a testing regime that is reliable and effective and quick in dealing with the coronavirus? Well, Donald Trump, at his Tulsa COVID party, he said the quiet part loud, or really just the unspoken part, super loud. Here he is in Tulsa last night, or Saturday night.
Then I closed it down to Europe early. Closed it down because I saw what was happening. And by the way, most people said, don't do it. Don't do it. We saved hundreds of thousands of lives. And all we do is get hit on like we're terrible. And what we've done with the ventilators and with the medical equipment and with testing, testing is a double-edged sword. We've tested now 25 million people. It's probably 20 million people more than anybody else. Germany's done a lot. South Korea's done a lot. They call me, they say, the job you're doing, here's the bad part. When you do testing to that extent, you're going to find more people, you're going to find more cases. So I said to my people, slow the testing down, please. They test and they test. We got tests that people don't know what's going on. We got tests. We got another one over here. The young man's 10 years old. He's got the sniffles. He'll recover in about 15 minutes. That's a case. Add up to it. That's a case. That's a case.
$115,000 dead. And here he is admitting that he has told them to slow the testing down. Now, after people were like, hey, wait a second, maybe that explains why the testing has been so slow to happen. Because the president has ordered them to slow the testing down. Maybe that's why there's $14 billion still unspent with testing and contact tracing. They came out later and said, oh, no, it was a joke. He was joking. He said it multiple times, but it's a joke. Just like he said with the Mexicans and the rapists. And just like everything else he's ever said, it's a joke.
Yeah, like when he told the cops, bang their head on the cruiser when you put them in.
Right.
Just be rough with them.
Just a joke. This has been, and look, this is, you can go back to when he was at the CDC and he said, I don't want him to come off the ship because it's more cases on my watch.
That is kind of funny.
It is sort of funny.
I'll give him that.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's one of those things that like we're going to look back on this and laugh and laugh and laugh, except for the tens of thousands of people who died who wouldn't otherwise have died, and except for the massive economic immiseration that I think we are yet to begin to really fully appreciate. I mean, I think like to the extent that people are feeling it, it's going to get a lot worse in the coming weeks as that unemployment runs out and as the PPP runs out, and we start to see sort of like the aftershocks of this shutting down.
I mean, housing courts are opening back up again for eviction proceedings, and that's going to have a huge effect. I mean, we knew that a crisis was coming, but COVID made it like 100 times worse.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And so it's going to be one of those things we're going to laugh and laugh and laugh, but we're going to need a lot of distance from it. Like maybe even further along than how long we're all going to live. So this could be something that theoretically, if there's still a functioning society, in 150 years, they're going to look back and they're going to go, that was a funny time. It's going to be like, there's going to be some dude who's going to be streaming through the chip that we have implanted in our heads at that time. He's going to be playing a virtual reality, video game. And he's also going to be playing, the other chip in his head is going to be playing like a audio recording of some type of book on this era.
Matt 3000.
Exactly. And they're going to be laughing. They're going to be laughing. Like, can you imagine what an idiot that guy was? And what were people thinking? What a screwed up country we had back then.
Before this happened, we were laughing at the previous pandemic when they had a parade and caused another resurgence of it.
Exactly.
Like that was funny. And now we're way dumber than they were.
Way dumber.
Well, maybe some of us are just dead inside and can detach enough to laugh about it now. I don't know.
That's right. Loosen up, folks.
Takes all kinds. I will say I got my COVID test on Saturday. Don't be afraid to go get tested, folks. It's not that bad.
Did they do which one did you get?
I got the full brain probe.
Ooh.
It wasn't so bad. I was in and out and there was no line. They have their testing game down in New York City now, I gotta say.
So who do you send out to talk about Donald Trump was joking when he said we're slowing down the testing? Well, of course, you set out to the press to sort of walk back this statement. You send out the head of the guy who's in charge of all the testing, right? Except for that position no longer exists in the administration. They got rid of that position. Well, then you set out like maybe the head of the CDC who's in charge of no, they have shut this guy out. Or maybe you send out Fauci. They haven't talked to him in months or weeks. So who better to send out to calm the country down and make them understand that the president of the United States has not told his people to slow down the testing so that we're not aware of how many cases we have? Who better to send out than a lunatic who's in charge of trade?
Times. And the troubles facing the nation followed the president into the arena in many ways. Joining me now, White House trade advisor Peter Navarro. Mr. Navarro, thanks so much for joining us. I want to start on what the president said about coronavirus testing at his rally last night, which alarmed quite a few health experts. Take a listen.
When you do testing to that extent, you're going to find more people. You're going to find more cases. So I said to my people, slow the testing down, please.
Come on now, Jake. You know it was tongue in cheek.
Did the president?
Come on now. That was tongue in cheek. Please.
I don't know that it was. I don't know that it was tongue in cheek at all.
I know it was tongue in cheek.
He has said similar things for months.
Tongue in cheek.
He has said similar things for months.
But you know what? We got
But he has said similar things for months. That
over 30 million people unemployed, and we've seen over 100,000 people die because of the China Wuhan virus. Let's talk about some serious issues, Jake. I don't want to go there. I think there's some really important things. I'll break a little news for you.
I think testing is a very serious issue. I'm not the one making jokes about it. You're the one that said the president
it was a light moment.
The president was being tongue-in-cheek.
All right, we're 60 seconds into a tongue-in-cheek thing. Ask and answer it. I think what's important going on in this world today are things like John Bolton publishing a book. Here's the breaking news for you. I read the judge's decision on that, and
we'll get to Bolton in a second.
Sure, but I want to say this:
I do want to
highly classified information in that book, and that guy should be turning in a seersucker suit.
I'm going to get to Bolton in a second. But I still want to talk about the pandemic for a second. Fine, you think it's tongue-in-cheek? I'm saying
was a light
120,000 almost Americans are dead.
That was a light moment for him in a rally.
I'm not sure that a deadly pandemic where almost 120,000 Americans are really a good subject for a light moment.
Absolutely seriously. But anyway,
let me ask you a question. The CDC says.
Yeah.
The CDC says.
There you go. He was just joking around about not testing because that's so funny. You get it? Here's the construction of the joke. People think we should be testing because that's what all the medical professionals say we should be doing. But I said, don't, because then maybe it'll go away. Ha ha ha. Which is also like the entire joke I was playing on the country through March, essentially saying it's a hoax because maybe it'll go away. And sometimes when people don't laugh the first time you tell that joke, you keep telling it over and over again until they finally see the humor in it.
Yeah, he really owned all those dead people.
Totally.
I'd like to pivot to, let's talk about important things like John Bolton's book that I don't like, that the president doesn't like, in the face of a deadly pandemic.
What's also fascinating is that every time they say it's leaked classified information, they're saying this stuff is true. They're confirming it, right? Because you can't classify fake stories. You can't say John Bolton had fan fiction that we classified. No, if it's classified, which I am not quite clear on what would be so top secret, just like the incompetence of the president, then it's true. But F John Bolton too, incidentally.
It's funny. I was just going to say, it's funny in the way the Emperor of Austria joking about using the war to kill off excess labor force that they can't pay is funny. That's the way it's kind of funny.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, Larry Charles' Dangerous Comedy goes through all the horrifying things that people find funny and the most war-torn parts of the world. And it's like, oh yeah, it's funny when you kill your enemy who's weaker than you. That's funny to me.
Look, I made a commitment on Twitter, and I'm going to fulfill it. First, my first glass of water. And then let's play this clip, and I'll do my second.
So then my wife said, well, it wasn't only the ramp. Did you have water? I said, yeah. I was speaking for a long time. I didn't want to drink it, but I wanted to wet my lips a little bit. You're working hard up there with the sun pouring down on you. I love this location. The sun's like this. This way they save on lighting, right? That's why they did it probably. So what happens is I said, what does it have to do with water? They said, you couldn't lift your hand up to your mouth with water. I said, I just saluted 600 times like this. And this was before I saluted. So what's the problem? She said, well, I know what you did. You had on a very good red tie. That's sort of expensive. It's silk because they look better. They have a better sheen to them. And I don't want to get water on the tie. And I don't want to drink much. So I lifted up the water. I see we have a little glass of water. Where the hell did this water come from? Right? Where did it come from? And I look down on my tie, because I've done it. I've taken water, and it spills down into your tie. It doesn't look good for a long time. And frankly, the tie is never the same. So I put it up to my lip, and then I say, because I don't want it to, just in case. And they gave me another disease. They gave me another disease.
Now, what's weird about that is he couldn't finish the glass of water. So I just... there it is. There's my 2 glasses of water. Yeah. This is like, this is a cult, right? I mean, this is a cult.
I mean,
they're cheering him drinking the water.
I feel like I just watched a comedy routine in a language that I don't speak.
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good, that's a very apt description of it. You know, he was doing something that they all thought was funny and that he thought was really funny and warranted that like 5 or 6 minute run, but very hard to find how funny it is. I mean, look, there, so much of this was just the whole thing is just sort of ridiculous. The water, it's fun to make fun of him when he's like tiptoeing down the thing, because I think he is nervous about falling and everybody would like to see him fall. I don't think there were people saying that he had Parkinson's, like we heard from, in regards to Hillary Clinton during the 2016 thing. But what's amazing is his voters, their relationship to him is very different, I think, than we've seen from any other politician. They don't care what he does as long as he entertains them in some fashion. And fortunately, on some level or another, he's always entertaining.
Mm-hmm. He's entertaining to the people who like him.
Indeed.
And he's often entertaining to the people who don't. I'm going to be honest with you.
Yep.
Is it like a culture war thing, maybe? Like, you can't make me get hydrated?
No, it's a press thing. It's the media, I think. I mean, like, I watched the whole thing, and he's the biggest line he ever gets is like how fake the media is, and I think that ultimately like sublimates like all the things that they're experiencing in their own lives, like how everything is shitty all the time, and here's a guy at least saying that.
That's a shame. Because I thought it would be really funny if the Republicans all stopped drinking fluids to own the libs.
What is interesting, though, and I saw Weigel tweet this out. He said all the T-shirts that he saw, virtually none of them were about Biden. They were either about the fake media or the Clintons. And what I think is interesting about that is what the, Trump's, I mean, I think you're going to get more and more of the fake media, but I think like that reaches a significant portion of his base, but without, they have trouble like deciding on a narrative about Biden. It still is, it's Sleepy Joe. I mean, frankly, I think that is, that nails it, but I don't think people care enough. I don't think people get, he was talking about draining the swamp, not draining the low energy people. You know what I mean? Like he has no narrative with Biden that fits in with what was originally his narrative. And I think that's they're still struggling for it. And I think they're going to make the media, and I think they're going to try, for whatever reason, they can't now make, I think Trump is frustrated that he can't make black people part of that narrative because he feels that he needs to peel off some black voters. And so it becomes Antifa instead of Kaepernick but I just don't think that resonates either, because there's no substantiation for that whatsoever. And you see people try. I mean, do we have that clip of, did you see, what's his face? The Swanson guy, Tucker Carlson, was getting very angry at the Republican Party for not standing up for the desecration of what's going on in society. I mean, basically not standing up for white people is really what he was saying. And it was pretty, I mean, here they're trying to make Antifa and they're trying to make the protests be a thing that should be scaring enough people, but they're really having a tough time. Here's that guy, Matt Schlapp, or Mercedes Schlapp. Is this Matt Schlapp's wife?
Yes.
Wow. This is Mercedes Schlapp. She is a spokesperson for the spokeswoman for the Trump campaign. Chris Wallace wants to know why so few people showed up at the rally. And let's be clear, I don't think Joe Biden could get that many people at a rally during coronavirus. I don't know if he could get that many people. You know, I mean, I think at one point, if he had a rally, he could get decent amount, but I don't think he could get, you know, any more or less than Trump. But they thought they were going to sell out a 20,000 person stadium. Then they thought they were going to have 40,000 people on the outside stage, which they had to tear down. I mean, this was not like, they weren't just talking, they believed it. So why didn't these people show? Well, it appears on some level they didn't show because either A, they bought the hype that there was going to be 1 million people there and they didn't want to deal with the crowds, or B, you know what? Seeing Donald Trump, not worth getting a disease that has a whatever it is, 0.2, 0.4, 0.7 fatality rate. Here is Mercedes Schlapp trying to spin this with Chris Wallace this weekend.
Campaign said that more than 1 million people wanted tickets for this rally, but we all saw the pictures last night. The arena was no more than 2/3 full. And the outdoor rally that had been planned for the overflow crowd was canceled because there was no overflow crowd. Question, what happened?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Chris, and happy Father's Day to you. Let me explain. When it comes to understanding how the rallies work, it's a first-come, first-served basis. Basically, what the 1 million RSVPs include, it's an opportunity for us to gather data, to get information, obviously. So the key here is that is important is to understand, and I had this with my own personal family who lives not far away from Tulsa, that they were concerned. There were factors involved, like they were concerned about the protesters who were coming in. There were protesters who blocked the mags. And so we saw that have an impact in terms of people coming to the rally. But what was amazing, Chris, was the fact that over 5.3 million people watched it on all of our digital media channels. And so the reach was far and wide. And that doesn't even include the TV numbers. We also did a pre-rally show, and that was over 2 million views. So, you know, we're living in a virtual time as well.
Mercedes, if I can.
Yes.
The fact is the president talks about the attendance at his events. As we all know, he made a big issue of the attendance at his inauguration. He talks about how he can fill an arena and that Joe Biden can't. He didn't fill an arena last night, and you guys were so far off. If I may finish, and you guys were so far off that you had planned an outdoor rally, and there wasn't an overflow crowd. And watching the coverage and talking to Mark Meredith on the ground today, protesters did not stop people from coming to that rally. The fact is,
oh, absolutely, they did.
People didn't show up.
I'm telling you, there were people. I'm telling you, there were people and families that couldn't bring their children because of concerns of the protesters.
I mean, they're spinning this. I think there was a lot of people who probably tuned in to watch that speech, to watch all those people get to see how many masks would be there.
A lot of office betting pools.
Yeah, indeed. How much COVID would be spread around. I mean, they, like I say, I don't think there's any type of like real material benefit, first order material benefit from this, but I think it's going to hinder the campaign. Isn't he doing another one in a day or two? When's the next one, Brendan? He's got another one coming right out.
I'm going to his website right now.
And I think they're going to probably not hype this one as much. But I would imagine you're going to see a little bit of a shakeup with the campaign. I mean, that's got to be embarrassing for Trump on some level.
Yeah, we'll see.
On some level.
Yeah, I
apparently
think it's embarrassed, maybe.
Speaking of embarrassing and reporting, here's I don't know where make my day pack. I don't know. This was just tweeted. I don't know if DeSantis changed the guidelines for ICU reporting. And this is in Florida. Doesn't want hospitals to report the number of patients in ICU beds. He only wants hospitals to report the number of patients in ICU beds who require an intensive level of care. That can't possibly be the case. That's got to be a joke.
I don't know.
There's a lot being made about the tearing down of statues. I imagine I can certainly theorize that there are some statues that I would say I don't think deserve to be taken down. I think some are way overdue for being taken down. The Natural History Museum has announced that they are, with the permission of the city, they're going to remove the Teddy Roosevelt statue that is out in front of the building, where he is flanked by a black guy and an indigenous guy. And really, apparently, the basis of the statue was very much about sort of showing the racial superiority of Teddy Roosevelt. And it's been up there since 1940. The museum is making a decision that, like, this is problematic. This representation is problematic, so we're getting rid of it. And the idea that it's a destruction of history, or that it is recasting some type of, the idea that these statues were divorced from, were just objectively true and did not reflect in the moment that they were installed an ideology is absurd. And the idea that that ideology is any more relevant or important to maintain through that iconography in that moment and shouldn't be done now is absurd. Most of the statues that are being pulled down in terms of the Confederates were built in 1920 or in the 1920s, because there was a resurgence of I don't know if it was ever as large as it was during the 20s, early 20s, of the KKK in this country. And there was an ideology of white supremacy. I mean, you have Confederate statues in many places that have nothing to do with the Confederacy. And the idea that these statues weren't built based upon an ideology of the time, but that they were there as some type of objective representation of history is absurd. It is absurd. And those people who suggest, and they come from various, frankly, sectors of our politics, I've noticed lately. Those people suggest that this is somehow an attack on history and reality are simply just ignoring the fact, very conveniently, that these were ideological statements.
Oh, I think they know.
Yes, I think they know. But they're pretending that they're not. And they're ideological statements. that now our society believes are bad ideologies. And so it's not a question of disappearing the history. In fact, every single person who calls for the pulling down of a Confederate statue, every single person, I don't know, every single person, the vast majority of people who call for that, who call for the renaming of, let's say, military bases or whatever it is, I think would be very, very interested in more of the history being told. More history of that era when you had 6% of the country were card-carrying members of the KKK, or Reconstruction, or Jim Crow. We need more of that history. And I am perfectly on board with the idea of, like, for every one of those statues that comes down, there needs to be another class in their elementary schools, in their junior highs, in their high schools, teaching more of that history. That history should be so explicit. In fact, every single one of those guys whose statue's been turned down, we should know everything about them.
How many slaves did he own?
How many slaves? How many did they use as, basically to rape? How many people were killed in the name of maintaining that economic system of free labor and abused labor and completely commodified human beings? I'm on board for that.
Mm-hmm.
Here is Brian Kilmeade worrying about, I didn't mean to go on that long rant about that, but here is Brian Kilmeade going on to say that it's really wrong to criticize Jefferson for having slaves. This is sort of bizarre construction, but check this out.
Jefferson went into a society where his parents had slaves. Slavery is abhorrent, but it was everywhere on earth, not just in the United States, as some would thought is right. We'll never, ever be able to get our head around how the smartest people on the planet could rationalize this horrible behavior. But the smartest people on the planet gave us the country we're in, that allowed us to grow and change and progress, that was built into the Constitution. Right. So you don't wipe them out of history. You don't say they don't matter. You're going to have a history book, social studies, 5th grade. It's going to be nothing but blank pages.
But well, of course that's not going to happen. It's just a question of, the idea that statues are history in and of themselves. No, they are things that are there to express pride. And they are vehicles in which they are commemorating. It's not history. History is learning about these things and learning the good and the bad. If you had a statue of Jefferson depicted with the viciousness of his slave owning, I don't think people would want to see it, frankly, every day, but maybe they should. But you're not depicting history in that moment. You're venerating somebody without any critical assessment of who they are or what they're doing. And the idea, no, it's the opposite. These statues are obfuscating history. They are not teaching us it.
Well, they're telling their own version of it. I mean,
yes.
Maybe they should write on the bases, statues are not endorsements.
Right, exactly.
A lot of people like Crowder have been saying, well, what about the Lincoln statues? And it's like, if a Lincoln statue looks like this one does, yeah, like tear this down. It's creepy and weird.
Yes. I agree. It is we can go into describing why. I mean, the idea that like this was emancipation was just something that, Lincoln bestowed upon these people who were who were literally bowing down to him as if he was some type of
He had a great
god.
idea, just a great idea
Right.
one day.
Yeah, I mean, slave uprisings played a huge role in emancipation as well.
Of course, exactly. It was an untenable system. But the idea that these people, that this was a godlike thing to do.
That wasn't even his primary motivation getting into the Civil War.
But even if it was, like, it's hard to imagine that Lincoln perceived himself to be godlike in the face of slaves. But B, if he did, why would you celebrate that? Like, it's like either it is inconsistent with Lincoln's perspective, or it's consistent with Lincoln's perspective and it's an offensive and wrong-headed perspective. If you want to create a satire or you want to make a comment that depicts the notion that Lincoln was twisted and saw himself as some type of god who had the ability, a deified ability to liberate the slaves, then depict that. But that statue does not read that way. That statue reads like he's a god. Mm-hmm. And these people are bowing down to him because he delivered them.
Like, oh my God, thank you.
It's basically the great man theory of history objectified.
Yeah, pretty much. The thing I like about the statues going away is that people are doing it themselves. And that's always the best way to do stuff. You don't write to your congressperson. You don't speak to the manager. You just wrap a chain around it, get some folks together. Boom. Empowerment.
I don't know. I personally, I think what I would like to, the part that I like better is when cities and towns respond to what's going on, and it makes them actually assess it, think about it, and make a public decree that as a society, we're no longer going to venerate these people. That I like better. But
well, that often follows from the first thing.
Indeed. Agreed. That's the part I like about it. So it looks like Trump is going to Arizona on Tuesday. He's just doing his Corona hotspot tour. Then he's heading to Wisconsin for a speech at a shipyard. Let's talk about that Teddy Roosevelt statue that Brian Kilmeade, he can't handle. That they're taking down the Roosevelt statue in front of the Natural History Museum. Let's see if there's an image of this statue in this clip, because it's offensive. And they've been thinking about doing this for a while, the museum has. And the only hesitation, Roosevelt was very key, and there's plenty of things that are named after Roosevelt in the Natural History Museum, because it was largely a function of the Roosevelt family that this museum exists. And it's a great museum, and they should get credit for it. But this, where you're basically just, again, celebrating the conquest of Black people and indigenous people by Teddy Roosevelt, I think is problematic.
Let's move every statue of every single person that is not perfect or that.
Yeah, okay. So we're stopping right there. This is not a question of removing the statue because Teddy Roosevelt is not perfect. It is basically like just sort of like, look at what I've conquered. Maybe that's something that we shouldn't be necessarily proud of. And it's not like oh, good.
Or that is not reminiscent of 2020. This is reminiscent of its time. It's history.
Brian, but here's the thing. As you look at the closer detail, it's Teddy Roosevelt, and he's flanked by an African-American and by somebody who was
Native American.
A Native American, exactly. And so, for a long time here in New York City, there have been people who have objected because they have said it's a symbol of colonialism and of racism. But what's different about this is...
he's not even part of colonialism.
What's different about this particular movement is the museum, where it sits in front, says, you know what? We're going to take it down. President Trump tweeted out, ridiculous, don't do it. And then we hear this morning in the pages of the New York Times, Theodore Roosevelt IV, who is Teddy Roosevelt's obviously, heir, says take it down. It's time to take it down.
I don't know. I wonder what the people in Philippines might think about his colonialism.
That's imperialism, Sam, not colonialism, okay?
I mean, fact check. Every U.S. president is a part of colonialism because this is a settler colonial nation.
What does he think is being communicated? I wonder what he thinks.
He thinks it was colonial times, so he thinks like anything pre-revolution is colonial, and everything post is.
But I would like to sit down with Kilmeade and just be like, so what do you think though is being communicated by that statue?
Yeah, if it's part of its history and it's from its time, what do you think they were communicating when they put that up?
Yeah, I'm very curious as to what is the read on that statue that is like, that's something that we should remind people of every day they walk by it, or that's something that we should remind people of whenever they enter into this natural history museum. Like, what is it that we're reminding them of? I mean, if you have Teddy Roosevelt on a horse alone, okay, he's out there. He was he was very well known for his conservation. I don't know if a horse, maybe you could say that that's like him.
Just put him in front of Yosemite or something. So like he helped establish this, system in this country that people, respect as part of conservation efforts.
Right. This is an image of him riding through the West or something like that.
Yeah, there's Rough Rider statues of Teddy Roosevelt all over North Dakota, for instance.
Yeah. But
Focus on the good parts.
What is it that people think is being communicated? I want to hear like the good interpretation, the interpretation of that statue that we should feel proud of, and it should necessarily be there. Like, what history are we venerating with that in brass?
It's a little bit like, this is the original flag of the Massachusetts Bay Company, and it has a Native American saying, "Come over and help us," out of a speech bubble.
Wow.
How did you get that, Matt? How did you find that? Because they're not flying that flag anymore. I thought that history was completely erased.
Yeah, I mean, that's an argument for...
How is it that you found that?
History books, actually, which Kilmeade apparently writes. But
Well, maybe they like diversity in statues. They're like, look, you guys are always complaining about how all the statues are of old dead white men, and then we make a black statue and a Native American one, and you're not even happy.
You're not even happy. This is a great moment. This is pretty awesome. So this is a clip of a guy named Gary Chambers Jr. He's in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. This is at a school board. Is it a school board meeting or a city council meeting?
School board meeting, I believe.
You sure it's school board?
I'm not sure. Whatever Sean King said in the clip.
Okay, I guess it was school board. And apparently one of the members of the school board, and it's school board, they're talking about changing the name of the Robert E. Lee High School. Apparently one of the school board members, the last time they talked about this, was caught on camera shopping online, like scrolling through her computer, looking at online shopping during the conversation of this. I think regardless of whether you are in favor of naming schools after the losers in an insurrection who were fighting on behalf of owning human beings or not, you could probably understand how those folks who are, if not descendants of those human beings who were owned, directly descendant, but are living within the context of a system that was developed with that dynamic, that it might be worthwhile listening to what they're saying as opposed to shopping for new whatever it is, handbags. But
that's such a bitchy, mean girl thing to do.
Oh my God. So this guy, Gary Chambers, he starts with her, and then he goes across every other member of this school board. It's an incredibly impressive speech articulating why one might want to, A, as an elected official, engage in this, and B, why it may be offensive for folks to have to walk into a high school that is named in, celebrating Lee's heritage, as it were.
Next. So I had intended to get up here and talk about how racist Robert E. Lee was, but I'm going to talk about you, Connie. Sitting over there shopping while we talking about Robert E. Lee. This is a picture of you shopping while we talking about racism and history in this country. Only white members of this board got up while we were up here talking too, because you don't give a damn, and it's clear. But I'm going to tell you what the slaves, my ancestors, said about Robert E. Lee, since you don't know history, sister. Let me tell you that they said when he got the plantation, after he got off the field where 27,000 people died at Gettysburg, Connie, Robert E. Lee was a brutal slave master. Not only did when he whooped the slaves, he said, lay it on them hard. After he said, lay it on them hard, he said, put brine on them so it'll burn them. That's what Robert E. Lee did. And you set your arrogant self in here and sit on there shopping while the pain and the hurt of the people of this community is on display, because you don't give a damn, and you should resign. You should have resigned 2 years ago when you choked a white man in his house. You should have resigned 2 weeks ago when you got on TV and said foolishness. And you should walk out of here and resign and never come back, because you are the example of racism in this community. You are horrible. Now to the rest of the board. You have an obligation to the people of this community, and 81% of them are black. And do you need a Klan rally outside, Mr. Rohde, before you end it? Because holding it up means that you put that building in jeopardy. You do, sir. Because all over the country, they burning stuff down. And black folks in this city have stood with protesters. I ain't seen you elected officials out there with them, making sure that nothing goes south in Baton Rouge. It's been folks in this community who give a damn, not just when it's comfortable, but every time. And 4 years ago, we came down here. Mr. Drake, they say you're a good man. Be a good man. Black folks say you're a good man. White folks say you're a good man. Your legacy is attached to tonight, brother. Your legacy. Now, let me say to the black members of the board, it's the most solidarity I done seen out of y'all in forever. Let's keep it that. Let's stand on this moving forward, because we don't need to apologize for Connie, Evelyn. She showed you who she was when she was sitting next to you while you were talking shopping. You don't need another example.
People can see the rest. People can go and see the rest at Gary Chambers Jr. I think you can find that maybe online or, but I mean, that's, that gives you a sense of basically how seriously, at the very least, that one member of the school board was taking it. And the idea that, here's this guy whose ancestors were enslaved, and his kids have to walk through a building that is celebrating this guy. Like, what is the message that's being communicated here? It is, despite the fact that the Union Army defeated us, despite the fact that we lost the war, these ideals live on, right? Like, that's why you do it. That's why you name things after people, to remind people. And what is the central thing that Lee did? It's not like him being the general of the Confederate Army was an afterthought. That is the reason why you're celebrating him. I mean, and what was that endeavor? What was that about? It wasn't about maintaining, I don't know, the Southern cuisine or something. What was the fundamental aspect of their heritage that was being fought for? There was no other edicts about the South.
Yeah. Everybody knows what it means.
Of course.
Yeah. And this is also why the left or liberals should not abandon red states, right? Because a lot of red states are ruled by a small, rich, white elite and also contain many Black and brown people who that elite is doing terrible shit to. And you can't just be like, well, I only care about the blue states because they're going to vote for Biden or whatever.
I mean, yeah, I mean, both from like a from an electoral standpoint, from political power standpoint. I mean, it's you always, but also just in terms of justice. Yes. Just to, you know, that it's, I mean, it seems like the idea that you could fight for the expansion of Medicaid, right? Which is going to provide material benefit for people in many of these red states. Many of these red states that are not expanding Medicaid, there's a significant number of Black people, of brown people, and obviously white people as well, who are not going to get health insurance because of the preventing the expansion of that Medicaid. Every time there was a mechanism to disenfranchise and essentially diminish the political power of Black people, it also, in part by design, but also as just sort of like this is a twofer, it would diminish the political power of poor white people as well. And poor people, just broadly speaking. But you saw it in terms of voting. You saw things like, you know, poll taxes and literacy tests. And they were more than happy when they started to institute these things following Reconstruction. Very low percentage of people would vote. And they were more than happy to say, like, okay, as long as, you know, we're happy to keep Black people from voting. Got no problem with keeping poor whites from voting as well, because that will also make it much easier, our project. And the idea that you could get, and it's the same thing with the expansion of Medicaid, right? I mean, we're going to deny it to people living in poverty. And we're also going to, you know, the top line is those Black folk won't be getting anything free here. And I'm convinced that, like, the more assertion of the value of these people's lives, which comes through, you cannot sit there and essentially create what is the modern day equivalent of a temple or an idol, that I need to walk through underneath that name or walk by that statue every day. That is a reminder of my place in society. Every day that's up there, it is a reminder that I have a second-class citizenship, essentially. And I'm not saying as soon as those statues come down that you're going to see expansion for Medicaid or material benefits flow following that. But the idea that you're going to have material benefits for people who can't even walk around in public without a reminder that this society celebrates people who made your ancestors slaves. Like, those two things, you're not going to get material benefits before you get rid of that reminder. Let's put it that way. You won't necessarily get it by getting rid of that reminder, but you won't get it until that reminder is gone.
It's all part of the same fight. It's all part of the same process. Also, I don't know who the guy is in that video, but he should be a political leader of some sort because he rules.
I mean, it sounds like he's already like a community leader. I mean, he has a savvy about everybody on that school board that I don't think somebody in passing would have.
Yeah, I don't know if he's just like a concerned parent or if he's already some sort of political guy.
I get the sense
if he's
that
not,
he's
he should
at the
be.
very least, involved, active in the community, because he seems to know about what's going on that board in a way that a typical person would not. But But not everybody needs to have that level of savvy to be legitimate. Here is Joe Rogan. He is basically creating a hypothetical in his mind. And then he is saying, this hypothetical I've created is really problematic in the real world. He's sort of skipping over the part of it, like not necessarily being a reality, but go ahead.
See this leaderless movement, and it seems so attractive to young people that do feel disenfranchised by the system. So I watch them. I mean, I've seen so many videos of these people out there screaming and cheering and chanting, and they feel like they're a part of something, right? And they are, right? But what is that thing that they're a part of? Like, what's the end goal? That doesn't seem to have been really clear. Still, like, there's kids out in they were out in Woodland Hills out there chanting "No justice, no peace," and I'm like, okay, what justice are you talking about? Are you talking about George Floyd? Well, that in that case, it seems like that guy's going to go to jail for the rest of his life. And I don't know if that's justice or not. That police department has been disbanded. I don't know if that's justice or not. But what is justice and what is peace? It's just a slogan, but they feel good saying it. No justice, no peace. But I don't know what you're saying, but you feel very passionate about what you're saying. And I think if you pulled one of those kids aside and said, what's your message and what are you trying to do? I think a lot of them would have nothing to say. And that's very concerning to me. I'm very concerned about that because it seems like they're very enthusiastic and passionate about an invisible enemy, an enemy that they can't put on a scale. They can't tangibly describe it in a way that I understand it completely. It just seems like the structure of things they feel like is unjust.
I mean, the irony of that is that at the end, he nails it. It seems to them like the structure of things is unjust. Well, yeah, actually, that's it. You got it. Now, he's gone through a whole, this is the weird thing, is that Rogan here is describing himself. He doesn't understand it. Yeah. And he, I think, feels somewhat sympathetic to what's going on, but he doesn't understand it. And so he projects this onto the people out there who are actually engaged. And it's quite possible that 10, 20, 30, 40% of the people who are out there can't articulate it. And that would make them exactly like every other member of every other movement that has ever existed at any time, anywhere. There are people who are better at articulating these things. There are other people who just have a sense that there's something wrong, and I want to go and support these people. But the idea that he can't describe justice, because he attempts, right? He's like, I'm going to try and guess what no justice, no peace means. Does justice means that Floyd needs to be, that the Floyd's killer needs to go to jail? Maybe. That seems to be happening. Does it mean that there needs to be reform in the Minneapolis Police Department? That seems to maybe be happening, but he can't get any further than that until the end, where he's like, maybe there's something structurally wrong that is unjust. And maybe that's what they're out there for. But it is a bizarre tick that one needs to project your own inability to wrap your head around this onto the people who are fighting for it as a way of discounting what they're doing. Because he's seen it on the TV and he's not saying to them personally, what are you fighting for? He's saying it to his TV or his computer. He's saying it to himself. He's asking himself. And because he can't come up with an answer, he presumes that none of them can. And I don't know what it is he's afraid of in that situation.
That's just the reactionary impulse caught on tape right there.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there's a case to be made that any movement should be able to translate its message to the average, like, dumb white guy like Joe Rogan. But I think he's just not really paying that much attention, honestly. This is like some dorm room level philosophy that he's talking about in this clip. He's like, dude, what if we're all just in somebody else's dream and when they wake up, we cease to exist? Whoa.
I am not fully on board with the idea that you need to communicate to Joe Rogan about that. Like, I'm not 100% sure about that. I mean, I don't think it hurts, but I don't think there's been any movement in this country, or there ever will be in any country, that has been able to communicate to 80% of the people and get them all on board for these type of reforms. I think you need a lot less, frankly, and to scare or to convince the right people. And maybe Joe Rogan is the right people that needs to understand these things, but it's not like he doesn't have a platform. It's not like there's nobody. Like, is there anybody in the country that he couldn't get to come on his program and explain it to him? You know, it's not like he's not sitting in the dorm and saying, like, I don't have access to the I mean, you don't know if it's a leaderless movement. I mean, like, go on Twitter for a half an hour and just like find the people that you find to be the craziest and see who they're quoting, and then ask that person to come on your show. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, he's head on Cornel West. Like that, you're really hitting upon some of the like disingenuousness of Joe Rogan, right? Because he does paint himself as this like everyman, average, dumb white guy, but he's like fabulously wealthy and has access to all the smartest people in the world. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is that, like, you know, this is he has the ability to actually examine this. He can actually go further than I was saying to my computer at these kids who were protesting in an area where, and I guess the idea is that, like, you know, I don't know about that, what that area is. If there's, maybe that's a Tony White area or something of LA. But he's wondering, like, you know, why are they interested in this? And he's worried, frankly, that these kids are, you know, and I think it's also an old man thing, frankly. I mean, he and I are the same age. I think it's like there is a definite change in the perspective of younger people as to these questions. And I think sometimes it's like, I don't understand it. So it must be that they have got it wrong.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's also relevant that Joe Rogan has said some really racist things in the past.
I also don't think that he is situated to be one of the first guys to get it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. We don't need him. Our movement doesn't need him.
Well, you know, now that he's going on to behind a paywall, he becomes, I think, less politically relevant in some ways.
Yeah.
And
he's Alex Jones in himself.
Well, it's more akin to what happened to Stern. Like, I remember the day that Stern, I mean, it's not as, you know, Spotify is far more accessible than Sirius XM. And obviously, you know, Howard made a ton of cash and the show continued on. But if you go and do like I don't know if it would pick it up at that. Oh, yeah, probably would. If you go and do a news search for Howard Stern prior to 2007 or whatever it was, 2006, when he went to Sirius XM, he was in the news almost every single week. He was in the news constantly. And then when he went to Sirius XM, out of the news. Just not became a part of the cultural vernacular because he wasn't on free media.
I'm fine with having Rogan's political power diminished. I think he sucks. And I wasn't too happy when the Bernie campaign elevated his endorsement. I was glad that the endorsement happened, but like the amount of like horrible, racist, sexist, and transphobic stuff that he said on his show, it's like not really something that I want the left to be associated with. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm curious about why they did that. My only guess is that they wanted to take a comment that he had made sort of in passing and sort of lock him in, but I wouldn't have done it that way for sure. All right, let's take a final phone call of the day. I'm sorry, folks. I got caught up in the thing. calling from a 408 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? You are the final call of the day.
Sam, is this me?
Yes, it is you.
Hi, Sam. Honored to finally get through. I'm a first time, long time. Sorry, I'm a little nervous, but
That's all right. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Brian.
Brian from?
Brian, I'm calling from Los Angeles.
Brian from Los Angeles. What's on your mind, Brian from Los Angeles?
Yeah, you were just talking about Joe Rogan and that Woodland Hills area. I happen to live in and around that area, and I can tell you Woodland Hills is an incredibly wealthy neighborhood, and he's probably, you know, thinking to himself like, oh, why are these wealthy white kids? Why are they doing all the things and it's probably just the dumb Jordan Peterson kind of analysis about people just going to be part of a movement to jump on the bandwagon or something like that, and coupled with his libertarianism. You know, I think that's kind of the analysis. When we see tons of people going out of multiple different socioeconomic backgrounds, including wealthy white people, marching in solidarity, and I think he just has a hard time grasping that, perhaps because despite the fact that, as Jamie just alluded to, he has access to this information, has spoken to Cornel West, and definitely should be aware of this phenomenon. But I think it's either disingenuousness or, you know, he's an old white rich guy and maybe just doesn't understand why younger, potentially wealthy white people would be marching in solidarity with poor black and brown people, because they understand the socioeconomic analyses that he frankly is completely ignorant of.
I think it's the latter. I mean, I know I just don't think that he is has a sophisticated agenda of misinformation. I just think that there are some things that he can't access, and so he defers to they must be disingenuous in some way.
I mean, look, it could be as simple as him protecting his own interests as a rich white guy.
He may be doing that, but I don't think he's doing it consciously. I just think that it is more ignorance and self-aggrandizement. You know, like both, like, I'm ignorant to what is going on here, and therefore it must be wrong. It's just, it's like, I think almost textbook ignorance. But go ahead.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree with you. And, you know, there's definitely something in the weird kind of libertarian sphere of, I don't know if he still defines himself that way, but there's kind of a strange dynamic with a lot of those people. I actually was going to call to mention something else, but the Joe Rogan thing, I just thought I would give context to that because I actually know that area a little bit. But the first thing I was going to actually mention is that you had that guy, Greg, that libertarian, calling in a couple weeks ago, I think at this point, talking about, well, why don't more leftists, why don't they welcome libertarians into the fold? Well, I can give you an example of why I'm a little hesitant to that. I was at a protest in Pasadena with my girlfriend and another person, and we were in a crowd, and a giant white truck with 3 flags on it. One of them was a Gadsden flag, the Don't Tread on Me flag. One of them was the Thin Blue Line flag. And one of them was the original 13 colonies flag that doubtless you know has been reappropriated by white supremacists, was on that truck, and it attempted full speed when we were in this intersection to run through everyone.
Oh,
and so when the Gadsden flag has been appropriated, or I guess maybe not even appropriated, but applied in the context of Don't Tread on Me, I'm going to run through peaceful protesters who the only violence I witnessed was that attempted running over and then somebody else trying to run through the crowd. And the protesters were, you know, they were marching in the street or whatnot, but weren't bothering everybody. All of the POC leaders were urging nonviolence. They were trying to get people who may have been angry at those cars to stop confronting the cars and whatnot. But, you know, it's obvious why they were angry when somebody tried to run through them. And if the Gadsden flag, the Don't Tread on Me flag, is running at you at the vehicle with blaring its horns, clearly, I mean, his rolling pulses, clearly trying to run people over. Like, I assume for racist reasons. Maybe that's the reason why we don't trust libertarians. I mean.
Well, but, you may not have the proper type of libertarian. Though that may be a utilitarian libertarian. What you need is an ontological libertarian. So,
the
Brian,
flag says, "Don't tread
call.
on me." All right. The I in that formulation can literally still tread on you.
That's right. You're just it just goes one way. That's all.
My tread's on you.
My tread's on you. All right, we'll take a couple IMs, get out of here. Bronze Plan. Listen to a Society of Actuaries podcast this morning with the Kaiser Foundation VP suggesting Cobra is uniquely capable to address the problem of the pandemic because it alleviates network disruption. This is a terrible argument. Network disruption is negligible when the cost of Cobra puts such an extreme cost burden on the recently unemployed population. This is a choice people won't make and shouldn't make. If you are in the 6th District of New York, vote for Mel Gregarian over Grace Meng. Meng has received numerous donations from the police union and was even proudly endorsed by them. She's refused to debate Mel. Mel is a Democratic socialist. Noah from Tampa. I know it's far away, but what's the plan for 1 million YouTube subscribers? No plan.
Get that gold button or the platinum button, right?
Oh, yeah. Can we create an MR Woodworkers Club? Are you a fan of Japanese pole saws? I actually am. I mean, I don't have a lot of them, but I yes. Who wouldn't be? What do you mean? You guys have really made me appreciate my friends that watch my YouTube videos. Shout out to Jordan and Jess. Jordan Peterson, for all those wondering, this is my son, Ben Shapiro. We have shared no blood, but he is my life. He came to LA. Baratha too. Her name is pronounced No Miki. No Miki. I hope you add Cedar 2022 merchandise soon. Brendan's phone number. Sam, how was your Father's Day? My Father's Day was actually pretty good. My kids, Mila has a homemade waffle maker now.
Ooh.
Yeah, she made me waffles in bed.
She made a waffle maker?
She constructed a waffle maker and then made me waffles. No, she has a homemade waffle maker.
Oh, okay.
I got to get me one of those.
They're not expensive. Like $23. And then I had waffles, and then we hung out. Saul and I played a little basketball, and he made a hydraulic claw. That was basically it. Hung out, and then Saul threw a fit for about 2 hours last night. So that was the way we wrapped it up.
I knew that was
like
coming.
Genuine Father's Day. Derek from New Jersey. Sam, what do you think about a spinoff show from Home Movies starring Fenton Muley, who is now a 20 or 30-something-year-old conservative YouTuber? Fenton has a show called Venton with Fenton. He goes to colleges and challenges liberals to change my dogma. Calls everything he does doesn't like gay, and he gets cold feet when challenged to debate. I'm in. So, I'll do it. Mikey from Colorado. Greetings, Colorado. Hoping to vote Andrew Romanoff into office here by mail. We've had all mail-in ballots since 2014. The switch to mail-in ballots increased turnout by 9.4. If you're registered as an independent, you will receive a ballot for both major parties. You can return only one. Otherwise, your vote doesn't count. Most people I know don't even mail them in, but there are drop boxes all over the state. Right now, my understanding is that Romanoff is down by 7 to 9 points, but who knows? But let's knock on wood. I mean, get out there, vote for Romanoff. That would be huge. Mitch from Muss, Tanashi MR Crew, Indigenous Micah Niu, lawyer here from what is known as Canada. 2 recommended podcasts for you to get an Indigenous take on what's currently going on. Media Indigena, based in Winnipeg, and the Red Nation podcast out of New Mexico, I believe. The latter is great. Bunch of communist indigenous folk discussing some incredibly important topics. I think Jamie would enjoy.
Hell yeah. I know about them.
Red Nation podcast. Okay. All right. 3 more. Jamie's mustache. Do you guys have any thoughts on the video Ben Dixon posted on Instagram of the rally attending being removed for wearing I Can't Breathe shirt? Oh, yeah. No, I got to check into that. Somebody got removed for wearing a T-shirt. She had a ticket. I think, the ACLU will look into that, but I know that they do that. Nick from Oklahoma, as a Tulsa native, I was able to drink under an inflatable bunker baby and was out supporting Black-owned businesses in the Greenwood district. Supporting Black-owned businesses, my New Year's resolution this year. All in all, I'm proud of Tulsa for not letting things get out of hand and not showing up for Trump. Sorry, I meant lifelong Tulsa. Apologies. Okay, and the final I am of the day. Hey, Sam and MR crew, thanks for all you do. I got an MR mug for Father's Day. Nice merch, and let's get those carpenter pencils rolling so I can leave them on job sites. Left is best, and shout out to all the blue-collar MR listeners. All right, folks. Jamie, Matt, Brendan, thank you. See you guys tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie, Barr. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option.